You don't mention Donald Trump in this book, which is kind of staggering, really, and I presumably deliberate.
Yes.
Because you're talking about him really as a symptom rather than a cause. But let me suggest a third option, which is that he's a symptom that makes it worse all the time, because some of the critical things that you favor, for example, forgiveness, maybe one of the most profound Christian duties. It was one of the great revolutions, really, in human consciousness, when Jesus said, if you forgive the person who has wronged you, both of you benefit, you have more power. That act of grace actually moves humankind forward. The constant attempt for revenge, payback, is at the source of so much human misery. And when I look at Trump, more than almost anybody else I know, when he was at the prayer breakfast, he was asked, what's your favorite verse? And he said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Except I would do 1,000 eyes for an eye, 1,000 teeth for a tooth. And he's not realizing that Jesus actually specifically targeted that as exactly what he was against. Now, Trump is so antithetical to these virtues. He's absolutely passionately opposed. It's not that he's adopted them, it's that he is them. He's a deeply sick, wicked human being. I know you're not going to, but I
don't get me in trouble here, Andrew. Although, look, I'm not a fan of the guy and say that often. At the same time,
look, I'm not a fan of Biden at this point. I'm super conflicted, but I know this. I know that the character of that man is bad.
I didn't mention him by design, and in fact, just you and I were talking before we started, and I'll say that the way I wrote this was I wrote a book with a friend of mine and wanted to give him credit the last time, and this time he's like, "Oh, you should let me write the book for you." And it's like I personally don't like the idea of a ghostwriter. I should do the work myself. And so he said, you know what, we'll do it easy. I won't be your ghostwriter. We'll 2 days a week, we'll spend 2 hours, 2 days each week, and you'll monologue your book and I'll transcribe it. And then I'll go back in and put in the footnotes for the stuff. If you're referencing Carl Truman or someone, I'll find the article and I'll put it. So that's how essentially my book sounds like me on radio because I spoke it into being more than banging away on the keyboard. But along the way in that process, he urged me to have a section in the book. It's like, no, from practical real world experience, when I say the things I say and I leave him out of it, people on the right are more willing to accept those things that I'm saying. And the moment I bring him into it, it's like firewall must be defensive. I can say, thou shalt not commit adultery and don't cheat on your wife with a porn star. And everyone's like, yes, absolutely, you should do that. But the moment I say, you shouldn't cheat on a porn star like Donald Trump did, so, well, who said he actually did? How can you believe the people? And suddenly they've lost the point. So I'd rather them get the point than be turned off because I mentioned Trump.
But isn't that the point to some extent?
Yes, it is.
That he switches a switch somehow in which everything else disappears. And it's partly because it's who he is. He's incapable of understanding a non-zero sum engagement with somebody else in which both people benefit. He has to win. The other person has to lose. Not only does the other person have to lose, they have to lose clearly and badly. He can't only win. He has to win by a landslide, by a huge amount, by the biggest ever. The usual. You actually note in the book that Augustine, was it Augustine? I'm trying to remember, that hyperbole was something Augustine felt was an absolute sin, that he stopped learning rhetorical techniques in case he used that, because the Christian duty is to observe the unvarnished truth, not to spin it up. So once again, Trump is the antithesis of everything Christian. This is not, I think character matters, but not the only thing that matters in electing a president. I think you have other questions, policy, temperament, judgment, whether they've identified the right issues of the time. And I think there are things to say in defense of Trump. Let me say them because I think he was right.
Yes.
Let me say them just for the record.
Get me out of trouble here. Say some nice things.
Yeah, he was right that you can't sustain this kind of untrammeled immigration and just ignore its consequences and ignore what it's done. You can't just simply believe that the neoliberal global economy has benefited everyone when it hasn't. The Iraq War was a disaster and the Republicans conducted it. Those things that he was the only one to really, really call out, which is why he became the nominee, were important moves in American politics. Similar moves are happening across Europe in the face of similar pressures of mass migration, much less economic vitality in Europe than in the United States. So I give him that credit. On the other hand, he is so incapable of even operating within a democratic system. I don't think he's going to be a dictator, but I do think that his character requires him to eviscerate the rule of law basically as he breathes.